Welcome to Media Rebel Unplugged. My guest today is Dr. Melissa Robinson-Weinmiller, a TEDx speaker, EQ coach, and author of The Empathic Leader. She helps leaders build emotionally intelligent cultures that don't just feel better, but perform better. But instead of me going on and on about Melissa, I'm going to let her introduce herself. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to be with a fellow rebel. That's like the best.
Thank you. Yeah, we love having other rebels on. I mean, that's what makes this whole show important and keeps us going by connecting with other rebels like yourself. And I would love to dive in a little bit more about you and how did you become this EQ expert that you are today?
Well, it didn't start out that way for sure. I was a professional musician. I was a French horn player. I played in orchestras. I toured. I did, all the stuff. And I loved it. I loved the music. I loved the playing. I got to play with really cool people like Ray Charles and David Ogden Stiers and Mannheim Steamroller. I mean, people that I wouldn't have met otherwise because they're just not in my circle. They're not in my orbit. So, but I also like to eat and have benefits and do things like that. So I got my first doctorate and went out west to be a professor at a university. But within my very first term, I was assaulted by one of my colleagues, and it changed my life for more than one reason. The biggest one is just that the institution that I was in didn't want to hear about it. They didn't want to know what had happened. They wanted to put the blame on me, and they just wanted to make me go away. So over the course of the next 6.5 years, I ended up having to walk away from music, which was hard because it was the only thing I'd ever really done. It was all I knew. It's really hard to go from playing French horn and doing that kind of musical stuff to suddenly trying to find a job in anything else. So once I was out, I kept asking what had happened because I didn't understand. The naive part of me was just like, how could this happen? I was supposed to be in a university. This is supposed to be the most open, accepting, understanding, progressive, cool place in the world, and yet this happened and nobody could hear me. And this was before me too. So it's just to give you an idea where it landed in time. But the more I got to thinking about it, the more I was like, it's this connection. People didn't connect. They didn't understand. They didn't want to hear what was going on. And I had gone on to do some consulting with my husband and to get some other jobs and to do whatever I could. But this idea kept coming back to me of what the heck? How could an entire system be like this? So I started digging in further into the empathy side of things, and I got wound up about it enough that I decided I wanted to actually devote myself to studying leadership and empathy and understanding both and what we could do to make it better. And that's the rebel in me, because I'm like, nobody's talking about empathy. Nobody's looking at this as like a major leadership skill. So I'm going to dive headlong into it and be unpopular and tell the world why I think this is what we need to do.
I love that you did that, that you just grasped onto that and said, okay, this isn't being talked about out there in the world. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do it. And it's so important. It's not something that's taught to us. It's something I feel like I wish they would teach that in schools, especially from a very young age. It's such an essential part of humanity that I feel like we're lacking. But I commend you for your strength. And as a survivor myself of assault, really can identify with that. And I myself have not had great experiences with leadership. I was working for a major corporation at the time that I had been assaulted, and I took time off. I was trying to return back to work. I think I went back after 30 days and quickly realized that I could no longer function in that job anymore. I was in a sales facing job and I couldn't get on the phone. I was having horrible anxiety attacks before sales calls. So I went to a psychiatrist and she diagnosed me with PTSD. So I took some additional time off, went to HR, and we started talking about the accommodations that I would need. And they asked me how long I would have PTSD for. And for a
What?
major, and I mean, this is a major corporation. I'm not going to say their name. People can find out by going to my LinkedIn profile. But I was shocked that this was happening to me. And I said, this isn't like some quick illness that you get over, like the flu. I'll feel better in a week or something I need antibiotics for. And so they ended up terminating me. And it was this devastating move on their part that here I am at one of the most crucial parts of life needing support I've made this company millions of dollars, and they could just quickly fire a single mom who had just fought for her life, literally. And so I took about a year off, healed as much as I felt that I could before I had to return to work. And then that experience didn't go very well. I shared with them that I had PTSD, that I was an assault survivor, and one of my leaders actually, we had an incident where he triggered my PTSD by an action of his, and it didn't look like that was the best place for me to be anymore. So I left and started Media Rebel.
Good for you. I mean, it makes me sick to hear that anybody else has had to endure some of this, but to hear that resilience and that you know, you faced what was going on and chose a path that was going to be best for you. I mean, huge props and respect for that, because it's the scars that you don't see that can really make a difference day to day. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Why are we doing this in our organizations? This stuff is not for HR to even ask you that. This it's not like this is hidden knowledge. You can Google PTSD and it will tell you that.
Mhm.
So, my heart goes out to you, but
Yeah.
you
Thank
go.
you. Thank you. You know, it's sad that it did happen, but in hindsight now, I'm so glad that it did because it moved me. It moved me to heal, it moved me to grow, it moved me to become the person that I am now and also grow my own emotional intelligence. I think that going through our own traumas helps us identify with other people, connect with other people, and, those type of things cannot be taught to you. That's just life experience in general that teaches you that, but I don't for a second regret anything that I've endured because of that, and I'm sure you probably feel the same way.
Yeah, I do. I mean, steel is tempered in fire, right? If you don't go through the fire, you just never know how sharp you can be. So, no, I don't regret. There are things I think back and I wish maybe I had done differently, but I don't regret anything because it's all brought me to here. And obviously, if this happened to me and this stuff happened to you and this stuff has happened to so many other people, somebody needs to be out there championing this, that this is not okay.
Yeah.
So if that's what I had to go through to get here to be able to put all this together, then so be it.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people still see this as a soft skill, so how do you go about explaining to leaders, like, very directly how this impacts productivity and profit and retention?
Yeah, well, yeah, it goes straight to retention. So first of all, not a soft skill at all. And you're right, I get that pushback a lot, but it's not. Because think about it. If you are working to understand and connect with other people, and that's what empathy is. Empathy isn't about feeling necessarily. That's part of it, but that's like a teeny part of it. There's so much more. What it's really about is understanding and connecting. If you are actually seeking to understand and connect with other people, that means being open and vulnerable yourself, which takes courage. And last time I checked, courage is not soft. So
No.
that can go right out the window, you know? The other thing is that it really does affect profit, productivity, and innovation, among other things. And there's data to prove it. There was a big report put out by Ernst& and Young. I mean, the Big Four consultancy, you know who I'm talking about,
Oh, yeah.
in like right after the pandemic, because they were looking at the effect of empathy on the workplace during the Great Resignation. And they did surveys, they surveyed leaders, they surveyed people, employees. And what they found is it actually increased productivity by 87%, innovation by 86%, and profit by 84%. And this is not my
Are you bad?
opinion. This is Ernst& and Young. And we haven't even talked about attrition yet. So, people don't have to believe me. They can look at the data. It's there.
It's amazing to me, though, even when there is data, hard data there and studies that are done by the top professionals, that there are still people pushing back on that. And I don't know if it's just like they're stuck in that mentality of the way that we've done it is the way we'll always do it, and there's no growth ever from that. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's a big one. This is how I've done it and how my predecessor did it. And we've always done it like this. And this is how we're going to do it. Unfortunately, it's kind of a lazy way to go about it, but people do. The other thing is you look at these people that get into these positions and they got there somehow. Something they did worked. And if that's what got them to those positions, they're going to be a little scared to let go of that. It would be a very vulnerable thing to let go and say, okay, this has worked for me so far. Maybe it hasn't worked well, but it's worked. Am I really willing to even let go of that thread to try something new, you know? I mean, they've
Yeah, I
been
mean,
incentivized.
I think new is scary. I think growth is scary. I think there's maybe some people who don't feel that they're capable, and so
Yes.
they just don't try.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of it too, because a lot of people that get into leadership positions aren't necessarily there because 'cause they're the best leaders.
Yeah. Yeah, it's who they know sometimes, a lot of
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. And a lot
Yeah,
of times they know it. They're aware, you know? Go ahead, you were gonna say something.
no, I was just gonna say I had a conversation the other day with somebody, it was around the same thing of, this person was in a leadership role and she was like, "I know a lot more than they do, but they're there because they know this person and they treat us badly," and it's a story that we hear consistently, yet it's how do you really get that through to executive leadership on why you need to make those changes? And even when they have high turnover, like, why are they not understanding that this is something that's so vitally important?
Because they're not aware. They're not looking at themselves. They're not so one of the things I talk about is how there's more than one kind of empathy, right? There's emotional empathy, which is the feeling one. There's cognitive empathy, which is I logically understand what you're feeling, but I don't feel it. But there's also self-empathy, which means an understanding and connection with yourself. A lot of times these people are not connected with themselves. They're not aware of where they are in society. There's 4 steps to being able to do self-empathy, but self-awareness is the 3rd one, and they tend to miss it. They tend to miss several of the steps before that too,
Yeah.
until you can be aware of your place in the world and how what you're doing is affecting other people, you just there's a thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and what it is the more you know you don't know. So people that don't know a lot are usually the ones who think they know everything. But the people who really work to strive and to learn and to grow are the ones that are like, "Yeah, I really need to keep working on this. I have no idea."
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've studied leadership for years now, and they've always said that the best leaders are the ones who say, "I don't know about that," and look to somebody else on their team and go, "Well, what about you? What do you have to say to this?" You can't be an expert in all things, nor should you be.
No.
That is what defines us and makes us different and makes us strong as a unit.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're a good leader, you're gonna wanna surround yourself with those people because they're going to be able to take the whole team higher. That's just good leadership.
Yes, absolutely. And I think as we're using AI, and I love how you've kind of touched on this in past conversations, but I feel like AI has taken some of that EQ away in some aspects because it's great to embrace AI, but not to become AI.
Yes, well said. That's exactly right.
They're trying to integrate it. I don't know if you've heard this or not, but me in the tech world, they're integrating this into our phones and they want it to be, it's into the keyboard now. So it will send an automatic response when somebody texts you. Where are we with the emotional connection and the empathy if we have these AI responses directly in our hands at all times?
Yeah. Well, they've taken the connection out, and that makes no sense. So you're in tech. Did you see that MIT study that just came through?
I don't think so.
Saying that 95% of these companies that have rushed to institute AI into their platforms have had to pull it right back out again and bring people in to repair the damage that they've done. And it's
Yeah.
not because of the AI, it's because of the human factor. And that's
Yeah.
MIT.
We crave human connection. So to
Yeah.
think that and I did hear this because it was talking about the customer service aspect, right? They replaced a lot of these customer service jobs with AI. We've always had, like, these chat bots that have been integrated into different sites. It never goes well. It doesn't know how to respond. It doesn't understand that we feel frustrated or upset or how many times have we been on the phone screaming to talk to a human, and then they thought they were gonna replace.
Yes, yes. Well, and that's just in organizations. I mean, some of the reports coming out about people committing suicide and about harming themselves and because AI doesn't have any empathy, because it can't connect. But the scary thing is it can mimic empathy. It can make people think it looks like it has empathy, and in some ways better than human beings, which I think says a lot more about us as humans than it does about AI.
Right, and I would think that those struggling with mental health issues would be most prone to falling victim to that as well.
Yeah, especially if they feel disconnected and misunderstood.
It's really interesting as we're hearing about these different AI tools that are coming out to help people feel more supported. There's an app that my daughter, she's only 10, but over the summer, she felt alone. I was at work full time, I'm a single mom, and she was like, I felt lonely. So I downloaded this app and it's supposed to make me feel supported. I immediately was concerned over that. I don't want you ever turning to a device thinking that this is going to give you the love and the support that you need to fill this loneliness that you're feeling. Like it's understandable that you feel what you feel, but you have a house of brothers and you have mom and call me when you're feeling that way. But I think that that's something that we do have to caution ourselves on are these now apps that are being developed that are saying that it's going to solve this problem when it actually could cause more of a problem.
Yeah. There's more studies and reports coming out about these apps that are specifically geared towards mental health and how they're actually making it worse. They've pulled a couple of them. I know in the UK, I don't know if it's like outlawed or if they've just pulled them, but they were creating worse mental health outcomes rather than better. Because again, there's no understanding or connection. It doesn't get it. It's a fantastic tool. It's
Yeah.
great for what it can do, but what it can't do, it's really lousy at. And human
Yeah.
connection is one of those things.
Yeah. You can't replace a human.
No, no. Even when sometimes you want to, no.
Exactly. So what's your best advice to leadership right now when it comes to how they are embracing AI with their teams?
You have to put the teams first. I mean, just from a change management perspective, which is another one of the many hats that I've worn here and there. You've got to understand your people. There's a lot of fear around AI. There's a lot of hesitation around AI. There's a lot of misunderstanding around the AI. So if you're just going to pull this stuff in and think you're going to slap a band-aid on it and everything's going to be great because everybody's talking about AI, it's not going to work. You have to be able to understand and connect with your people, understand where they're coming from with this, and then actually take the time to help them use it. Also, from a change management perspective, a lot of times your sponsorship, the people in your leadership positions, don't actually have to use these platforms that they bring in. So they're just like, oh, what's the big deal? This is easy. Slap it in, no problem. And they don't see the problems that show up, like you're talking about with customer service and the fact that it doesn't actually work very well. They don't understand the people that are going to have trouble integrating yet one more platform. They're not going to understand what it is to have to be in the trenches and deal with it. So the best thing leaders can do is actually take the time to really know on a human to human level the impact that this is going to have on their people, on their customers, on their stakeholders.
Yeah, I came from an organization where a lot of our creative teams were afraid they were going to be out of a job because of AI and the art that was coming out, this deep real looking video footage. And while, there's some of it was laughable, I think one time one of our creative artists made one and the man had a shark fin for some reason instead of a hand. I was like, I don't think they're
Random.
replacing you anytime soon.
Hey,
But the deep real stuff, it can be I get it. I still feel like we still have to pilot it even as we're integrating these systems, but you're right, I think that leaders really need to think about how it affects their people on so many different levels. I mean, just like that, being afraid that they're gonna lose their job and be replaced by this tool that it's a lot cheaper than paying, 5 salaries on a creative team right now.
yeah. But you're also missing out on real human innovation. Because
Mhm.
with AI, basically it's pulling from what's already out there, right? Like ChatGPT pulls from the internet. Well, that means there's nothing that's actually creative there. It's
Yeah.
regurgitating stuff that we've already done. So if you want to actually have real innovation and real creativity, AI doesn't quite make that leap. At least not yet. I mean, maybe it will, but right now we just saw what ChatGPT 5 just flop. So
Mhm.
it's not this, finished, wonderful, beautiful gem just yet.
No, and there's definitely something to be said about human innovation and the authenticity that people are looking for to connect with, and that it's definitely lacking. I mean, you're not going to get anything authentic. I try to tell our clients that too. They'll use Chat GPT to write content for their websites, and what they're missing is the voice that their audience wants to hear, because a lot of times the input that it's giving Chat GPT ends up spitting out what sounds like the client because the client's the one who put it in. So it doesn't sound like the target audience. It's not copyrighted. So then you have to worry about plagiarism issues. And if
Mhm.
your competition is doing the same thing and then they're getting the same output, it's great for brainstorming, but
Yeah.
that's probably about it.
Well, and now let's flip that, right? Because let's say, 80% of people are using it because there are studies as well that are showing that we're starting to talk like ChatGPT, that we're getting this homogenized thing where we're starting to think like ChatGPT. Well, the 20% that doesn't are going to be in demand. They're going to be the ones that are really going to be able to command their price and be craftsmen and craftswomen. So, which side of that coin would you want to be on?
Yeah, I actually came across one the other day and she said bespoke. And I was like, that you got that from ChatGPT. So if you've ever used it enough, it'll come back with these certain words. I'm like,
Yeah.
nobody says that.
No, no.
Never in my life said bespoke. It sounds
It
so
does
weird.
though. It messes with our minds, you know?
Absolutely. So tell me more about, I'm really curious about your book.
Yeah.
How did it come to be and what could we take away from it?
So what I really wanted was kind of a primer because empathy is so misunderstood and how to actually integrate it into leadership is even more misunderstood. You've got these people that talk about it and I'm all for people who want to champion it, the Simon Sinek's and the Brené Browns and Seth Godin's and people like that. And they're like, yeah, get in there, use empathy. We got to use empathy. Okay, how do I use empathy? Well, I don't know, just go use it. Okay, but I don't know how to use it. I think I have it, but I don't know what it is. Well, it's okay, just go use it. We need to know how. And before we know how, we have to know what we're doing. So that was really what I wanted to do was be able to take this and say, this is what it really is. This is how you can really use it. This is how it pushes hard business goals. It actually, there are so many reasons to use it. Now, for me, the most important is the human to human aspect. But if you're going to be, Montgomery Burns from The Simpsons and just be a hard hearted whatever, there's real bottom line reasons to do it. And at least, maybe everybody gets treated better in the process. So the other thing is I do actually start each chapter out with a little bit of my story, but it's not because I want to, wallow in it. It's because I want people to see what kind of damage it does. And I have it spread out. So there's a little bit in the front of each chapter so they can see this decline that happens. And I'm sure there are a lot of people that will read it that they're not going to identify with every part of it, but they'll be like, yeah, I've had that happen. Yeah, I've seen that happen. Yeah, I've felt exactly like that. And I want the people who read it to number one, know they're not alone. But number two, to see the damage that it does in terms of human capital, in terms of real capital, in terms of the innovation, in terms of the productivity. Because I think it's one of those things because it doesn't show up on an accounting line, we don't necessarily see just how much we're losing because of it or because of the lack of it.
Do you encourage people to do some sort of survey of their team to say, you know, how they're feeling, maybe anonymously? Isn't that really a crucial step for these organizations or businesses to do?
It is. I don't necessarily advocate for a particular survey or anything like that, but even just, employee engagement surveys, when you get them, read them. I'm working with an organization now that's their employee engagement surveys said it all. Their people are not happy, but they didn't bother to read them or they read them and then they just kind of went over there and did something else. And it's like you missed your opportunity to understand and connect. You just kind of went, yeah, yeah, yeah. And there it went. So yeah, that's a fantastic place to start talking to your people, reading these surveys, understanding, but then what are you going to do with them?
Yeah.
You know?
And what do you advise them to do after they get that information and find out it is not as good as they thought it was?
You've got to address it, first of all. I mean, and this can be difficult to do, but you can say, "Look, we've been doing X, and obviously our employees feel they have no work-life balance. Our employees feel that they're not appreciated in the workplace. Our employees feel that we're not being competitive, not necessarily in terms of financial outcome, but in so many other ways here at work, they're not being motivated to produce because they don't feel that we have them supported. They don't feel they can trust us. So we're going to start putting actions in place because trust is what happens when words and actions align over time. We're going to start making sure that our words and our actions align over time so you can trust us. And we're actually going to address these issues, We're not just going to ignore you. We're not gonna go off and worry about other things. We're going to hear what you've said, understand where this is coming from, and connect with you on this level to create an ecosystem that benefits everybody.
Yes, I think that's really smart. I've been a part of organizations that, did things like that at some point, and normally it was during a new acquisition where now they want to know how was everything before they took over, and as you've said, they didn't fix it. You found out what we were disgruntled about, but you didn't apply it, and so the turnover, of course, through the roof. And I also think that it's kind of funny, but not funny, that some of these organizations don't ask until an employee leaves during the exit interview. But what do you do with that information you get from the exit interview? How are you applying it? And so many
Yes.
times they don't, because they take it so deeply personal that they can't look at it from a business perspective and address it.
Yes. Or they're so caught in the "this is the way we do it" that they can't change course because 'cause
Do
they're
you
so
think
you know?
Yes, so narrows that like to have blinders on. Not to make it a intentionally sexist question here, but do you feel that men lean more that way than women do? Is that what you're seeing with all the studies that you've read and studied up on?
You know, th it seems to be the case in older generations, but some of the younger generations, not so much, which is why that's where my hope actually really lies. You
Yeah.
know, some of the younger generations get a lot of flack, and in all honesty, that's those are the people I would like to see help change the world because they're not willing to settle for some of what the rest of us were willing to settle for, and they're gonna be the leaders of the future.
Yeah, I think of my dad. My dad's Gen X, of course, and I think of how it was a very brash. He's also from an Italian family. So you can imagine with
Yes.
that behind it, it's probably where I get some of my, strength from, but it was always like, "Ah, fine," "It's sweep it under the rug." And, I mean, that festers over time. That's the way he's always been, that's how he'll always be. And I love my dad to death, but that self-awareness, as you mentioned, is very crucial.
Yeah, it is. You can't actually make any headway without it because you don't understand your place in all of it. So how can you understand if you're a problem or not,
Yeah.
you know?
At the same time, I do think like, I look at my daughter, which they call Gen Alpha, but the things that she kind of whines about, and I get she's still a child, but sometimes I'm like, "Is that really something that we should be crying about right now?"
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because she's kinda children tend to place themselves in the center of the universe, they have main character syndrome because 'cause they're kids. They haven't figured out how to replace the me with the we yet and think outside themselves. The problem is when people become adults and they still haven't figured it out.
Do you think a lot of that stems from childhood trauma?
I don't know if you wanna know the truth. I haven't necessarily looked at childhood stuff real in depth. The childhood stuff that I've looked at has been to look at how they teach empathy in other countries. So, I haven't really dug into the trauma side of things, you know?
It's interesting, the countries from that perspective of how they do things, but, I mean, if you look at Russia versus America, completely different on the empathic scale.
Oh, yeah, totally. Well, you look at the Norse countries, Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and in the Gallup, happiest nations poll every year, they are always in like the top 5 and 10 and have been since the late 1970s. And they teach empathy in their schools as part of what they call social emotional learning, starting at the age of 6 and goes all the way through to 16. And they're the happiest nations on earth. What do they know that we don't?
Well, they definitely know how to teach empathy, and we need to start doing it.
I think it would be helpful. I mean, I understand I'm biased on this, but, I mean, again, you teach them to children. Well, those children are going to be the leaders of the future.
Mhm.
Isn't that what I mean, do you want an empathic society and people that understand and connect? Or they did a couple studies here in the US. They were long-term studies of universities. And between the 70s and 2010, they found that empathy in college students has decreased by 40%.
My gosh, that's crazy to me.
Yeah. We can change this, but we have to do something about it.
Right. And how do we start that? Like, how do we start integrating this into our educational system from a younger age?
Yeah. We tried social emotional learning, and there are some places that still do it here in the US, but of course, they put a bunch of stuff into it that had nothing to do with social emotional learning, and then there was a backlash, and a lot of schools pulled it out, and it just now it has kind of a bad rap, and it's too bad because we need to look at it for what it is. Social emotional learning, how to deal with people, your emotions and their emotions in society.
Yeah, that is a very crucial thing that we do. Well, I am really happy that you came on today. I think there's something for everybody to take away from this, whether it's a personal level or a leadership level. I think that you being able to take something that a lot of people would not build themselves up from and to grab the reins and say, I'm going to be the change that is needed here and I'm going to be the voice, I think is so commendable and I'm so honored to have you on here and talking about it today. Please tell people where they can find your book.
Well, and thank you so much. I can't let that go without, just letting you know how much I appreciate it and how grateful I am to be here. So my book, you can connect through my website, which is EQ Via. That's V as in Victor, IA Empathy. I also have a blog there so you can see what's going on. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes and Noble. It's available on most of the, internet sites that you go to for that stuff. And you can always catch me on LinkedIn, especially Instagram, some, but LinkedIn especially.
Thank you everyone for listening in today. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Media Rebel Unplugged and our very special guest today, Melissa. Thank you once again for being on here. Please go to our description so you can learn more about her and her book. I think you would take away some very valuable information that you should definitely apply, and we will see you next time.